CrossWorlds players have argued time and time again who are the best Sonic Speed characters, who are the best Supersonic Speed characters, but what hasn't been debated nearly as hard or often has been who are the worst CrossWorlds characters from a mathematical view.
Now, these characters may arguably be the worst from a stat standpoint, but that doesn't mean these characters are actually bad in any way. We have seen countless players represent every character in the game with a unique build and strategies.
Just because a character's stats are worse than others in the class, this doesn't mean they are a bad character by any means. All our thoughts are based on the opinions we have formed from CrossWorlds gameplay and every character's stat line. Nothing we say should determine who you play and enjoy, since all characters are great choices.
All characters are balanced, well, but unfortunately some characters have to take the gold medal as a loser. Regardless of how balanced the roster currently is stat-wise, we believe and know each character is fully viable. We will be analyzing the numbers and explaining in depth who we believe are the worst characters from a stats point of view.
Alright, so what are we doing today, Metal? Thank you for joining me, by the way. So what we're doing today is we will be going over the worst character of each class, but we will be going over their individual stats, and we're going to be doing class by class basis. We have worst speed, worst acceleration, worst handling, worst power, and then quote-unquote worst boost character, but also best boost character, because we only have one.
Technically speaking for now, because I see Whisper and Tangle right there on the bottom of the screen from the screen share you gave me.
Now, granted, we'll see what happens going forward, but let's just talk about Miku being the best / worst character, because why not? It's a joke. We know Miku is the best character by technicality on boost, but let's explain why she's good and what we think is the reason why. What do you think is the main reason you would argue Miku's pretty good?
Well, based on this right here, since everyone loves running level 4 tech drift, right, and since Extreme Gear is basically the meta prevalent, right, as of right now of recording, yeah, I can see the boost stat being very good with handling. Acceleration's kind of weird being at 14. If I had to have my changes on it, I'll swap acceleration with speed. Power makes the most sense because boost characters and vehicles can't take a hit worth anything, truly.
Yeah, I agree with that. The big thing with Miku that I think is going to be what's going to separate her later when you get like Tangle Whisper coming into the game, especially when you see other boost characters, we're going to see like power be a big part of the game, because like you said, power just in general is one of the best stats. You don't lose rings when you get bombed, you don't have as much of a stun period, things of that nature. Whereas with boost stat, you want to be able to pump your drifts out as fast as possible. Speed is always a good general stat. And acceleration is kind of mid, but the handling is what really helps a lot. So I think that's the best way to... I think no matter what, Miku is just always going to be a solid character.
The problem is right now, before we leave Miku, right, most power and some handling characters, right? I'm calling this out right now, right? Only like 2 handling characters, but majority of the power characters can outdo Miku at her own job.
Oh, easily. A lot of these power characters do contain like a very strong boost stat, and we will see that in a bit. So... out of all the classes, which one do you want to start with?
We'll start with the easiest one, which is acceleration.
I would say acceleration or speed is probably the easiest class to start with. I agree with the acceleration, so let's go with acceleration. So let's see here. So out of all the characters, we have Tails, Charmy, Zaz, the Pawn, Sage, Wave, 9, and Creeper. It's a small list, and you'll see it with power characters as well, but out of all the characters so far, just based on stats from what you're seeing, what do you think is arguably going to be the most important stat? Like, what do you think is going to be really dictating which one of these characters will be better or worse?
So, the way I look at this for acceleration characters, the acceleration stat is literally meant to be in-game, as it says. As soon as you start driving, you go from 0 to 100 as quickly as possible. And you feel it once in a while, but they have to complement it with the power stat to make it actually recoverable. So far, their weakest stat is handling and boost, which at this point, you're just basically going in a straight line as fast as possible, and people are just going to pass you as easily as they can.
The big thing with acceleration characters and why it's going to be very easy to pick a bad one out is mainly it now comes down to, since boost is not able, or they don't have a good boost stat, you're forced onto extreme gear, and even then, you have the weakest boost stat of all the classes, if I'm correct. So now it's going to come down to running one of the more fun power builds currently, which is consistent ring generation, and each ring you get speed off of it. So you're going to want to have a lot of speed and a lot of...
Yes.
Mainly you want to have a lot of speed and you want to have a good amount of power.
Strangely enough, I want to say is the acceleration. So I want to bring this up right now. I ran builds with power character, like every character in the power vehicle. And surprisingly enough, the acceleration class is the worst ones for the actual power vehicles.
It feels shocking, but at the same time, it's not as shocking as it sounds. It's mainly because like power cars you want to have solid speed,
but they also have really good boost in general as well. Like their handling is like their biggest weakness.
Yes, it's acceleration, and their power characters have the worst handling and acceleration. That's where the 2 dump stats are. Unfortunately, acceleration doesn't make up for their stats for power vehicles. They are literally being hindered. Their stats are basically conflicting with each other. You're just taking like a double negative.
I think right now, since we know what the stat is looking at and what the characters of the acceleration class are wanting to do, we know that we want to have the highest speed possible while also maintaining a pretty solid boost or power stat. So we can already eliminate characters, like arguably we can eliminate Zaz, Tails, Egg Pawn, and Wave from the pool automatically because they have the highest, and 9. They have the highest speed among all the acceleration characters or a middling speed tier. I think Sage, Creeper, and Charmy are in contention for the worst 3, specifically because you're not going to be looking to boost with acceleration characters, and now it just comes down to what other stats do they have that makes them worse. I think automatically on Rip, I think Sage actually, because she has more power than the other 2, I actually think she gets a pass on this.
Yeah, I was bringing this up, like Sage and Charmy stats are very similar. The only difference is that Sage has less acceleration compared to the power.
Yeah, I think that 1 power does make more of a difference than that 1 acceleration does. So I think it comes down to now Charmy versus Creeper as arguably the worst character. And keep in mind, big thing is that I think they're both fun characters. They're both pretty solid overall.
You want my honest call right now? I say the gold loser medal goes to Creeper. If we gotta give it a silver, I have to say Charmy, which is a kill right there to the B. But he has, unfortunately, Sage outdoes everything he has, and the only thing he has saving grace for him is just his acceleration and handling stat.
The big thing with Creeper is the fact that the next stat you really want to focus on if you can't boost is really just speed, power, handling in that order. And the fact that you're down 1 handling compared to Charmy, I think that's what's gonna really be the Achilles heel for Creeper. But I do agree with you. I think Creeper, in my opinion, is also the worst acceleration character, unfortunately. I do think, and just to quickly wrap this up, I do think it's kind of funny because a lot of people really rip on Egg Pawn as one of the worst acceleration characters. I think a lot of people rip on Wave to some degrees, not being the best acceleration character, but he's tied for Wave, Zaz, and himself as having the highest speed while also maintaining the highest power among the class. I actually think that matters way more.
So the way I looked at the stats, right? I'm looking at them right now. My headcanon theory is when SEGA was making this game, when they made Egg Pawn, right? I know it's saying, and I'm saying it's a controversial pick that they take the robot right here. I think they're planning to make him a power character at first, and then realize, oh wait, the roster's already too filled with power. We gotta shuffle this character onto a different stat line. And they realize, okay, he's too bulky, and once again, it'll be really funny to put him in handling, but no, they'll just shuffle him off to acceleration.
But he did get some good stats, so arguably. It is a shame that a lot of people rip on this character, but I do think he is not the worst by any means. Alright, since we picked acceleration, I think we should go to handling next.
I say, yeah, let's go to handling. Handling class is being underrepresented right now.
What separates handling class characters? So, a lot of the top players in CrossWorlds as well, a lot of these people really like using Amy, really like using Cream. That's something I have seen a lot, and I think a good amount of them also really like to use Silver. I personally like using Silver myself, and I like using Cream with my builds. I think they're both really solid characters.
Joker, hold on, let me just interject quick right here. Listen here, you fiendish animals playing Cream right now, right? I know she's an innocent little bunny girl. I know Cheese is great. First of all, y'all are demons on the track with Cream, right? Quit that shit. I hate seeing her massacre everybody in the lobby. That's my tangent. We're going back.
To speak on the worst character, I think the worst character by far is going to be harder to pick out of this group because you have Rusty Rose, who a lot of people might think is bad, but it's the exact same stat line as Amy.
You can't throw Rusty on the bridge. Wherever you rank Amy, you have to rank Rusty.
Rouge, arguably, is kind of like one of those characters that she's in contention because of low power specifically. I think Rouge, because of her low speed, her low power, and the average and like the high average boost, I think that's what makes it harder for her because the fact she has the lowest power among all the characters and the lowest speed, it kind of sucks.
The problem is with Rouge is I've been using her with extreme gear a lot. I used her with speed vehicles, right? Strangely enough, she does better in speed class cars compared to extreme gear.
Yeah, I can see that. A lot of these, I feel like it's crazy to think about it like that too. But it's mainly just the fact that she has such a low power stat and then the speed stat is just low. Like, again, I feel like Amy is just so widely used, it's hard to rank her as bad. But at the same time, like, if we're going to rank Rouge low as well, it's mainly going to be based on the power. I think that's what's going to really be the Achilles heel.
Well, the problem is right now with all the handling characters, right? Their whole gimmick is basically they can make they can make turns the sharpest or the widest easily as possible. They can control the turning. And since this game allows you to, and I quote, let you snake, and Tech Drift allows you to snake even better, but you can just charge up a boost even quicker, the handling class is in a weird place right now. Like, I can't say Amy, Rouge, or Rusty is in a bad spot. I see representation of almost everybody here. The only character I can say that has respectfully fallen off, right, is Joker, which is weird to say because his stats all across the board, right, are balanced out. If anything, they're probably like just bumped up a little bit more, just he has to take a hit on handling. I think the big thing is
he's a character that was built with a speed car in mind as his main vehicle. He's the first of all the characters to have a car that's in a different class, so his stats are altered to fit that specific vehicle way better. So I think what the big thing is, especially with desync being involved, I think desync is going to be a big killer for a lot of this. But I want to say, like, even though Amy, Rusty, and Rouge are arguably, like, from a representation standpoint, they are really represented properly, I actually would argue, because their power is so low and their speed is the lowest of the class, I actually would argue they are worse. Even though all the handling characters are good, in my opinion, I think every handling character is good. I think the fact that just from a stat standpoint, handling and speed, or not handling, power and speed on these three characters is the worst. I think that's what's going to make the difference, in my opinion, for me at least.
I want to bring this up right now because we have not yet talked about them with their acceleration stat, because they have a low speed, but the acceleration makes up for them real quick, and they have the highest boost stat also. Well, relatively the highest, so it's balanced out really well. If anything, SEGA cooked really well with these handling stats. I think this is the one they gave the most focus on.
I think, like, there's not a single character in this class that I could say is bad. Like, genuinely, I think it's the same thing with, like, the power class. Like, the power and the handling class have characters that are just super solid across the board. Like, even if you look at them from a stat standpoint, you still see them play no matter what, and you can make them all work. To kind of, like, bring the conversation to a rest, I think, sadly, out of all the handling characters, it's kind of a hard choice, but I actually would argue it's kind of ironic too. I actually think the worst handling character out of all, even though they're all good, I just want to preface that, all the characters are really good. The worst, in my opinion, specifically from stats, I actually would argue is technically Rouge. I think that her having the lowest speed and the lowest power simultaneously, while having less handling, I think that matters more than having a slightly higher acceleration and a higher boost stat. SpongeBob has, and it's funny, he has the highest speed, highest power, and highest boost in this class. He has less handling, but from a soft cap standpoint, that doesn't matter because they're already so high on the handling stat list. Like, it actually doesn't matter at all. I think that's where Rouge actually loses out, is because because all the handling characters have to have a set amount of speed and power. The fact that she is in the class of the lowest while still having less handling than both Rusty and Amy, from a stats standpoint specifically, I actually think Rouge is the worst, unfortunately.
Sorry, Rouge. You get the contender for being the worst handling character right here.
She may be considered the worst handling character in our opinion. I don't think she is at all a bad character. I think she's a very solid character.
At all, overall, right? No, she's like, all the handling characters are great. They all have their moments right here, but unfortunately, someone had to take the gold medal for being the worst handling character. If we had to do silver and bronze right now, this one would take forever. We're just gonna do the champions of each one.
If we sat here for top three, I think for the handling class, it would take forever. I mean, I guarantee you, we would anger the whole player base if we put Rusty and Amy in the bottom three.
At this point, they're fighting for, like, they're two losers looking for, like, second place right now, which is unfortunate.
All right, let's move on to speed characters, and we'll round it out with power characters. Speed characters, super underrepresented group.
Oh,
all right.
I'm ready for this right now.
Speed character, super ready. Highly controversial. Truly. Let's put it this way: in supersonic speed and sonic speed, I have a lot of experience in supersonic speed time trial. I can say this for a fact: you do not see a lot of SPO players. SPO having the lowest speed stat is very, very detrimental. Now, granted, he has the highest power stat. When you're going from just a general gameplay standpoint for casual, for competitive, and just in general trying to play like time trial, I feel like SPO really is kind of
the biggest loser currently, in my opinion.
If I interject right here, right, I'm sorry, but I gotta bring this up right now. SPO and Metal Sonic do be tapped for the highest power stat because I've been main metal all the time. But I have to give SPO respect where it's due. He does have the best handling stat in the entire speed class.
His power is what matters a lot. I think what the biggest difference is in this class is every one of these characters in the class have a double-digit power stat. And so you're very rarely going to see, like, a few points matter. You want as much speed power boost as you can get across the board. So I think SBO, having the lowest speed stat specifically, he's the only character as well that has an 8 boost stat. And I think that is what actually brings the contention, in my opinion. I think Sonic, it's hard to rate Sonic or Metal Sonic as worse because they're both just solid characters. Like, Sonic is highest speed in the game, tied with Blaze and Shadow, while Metal is just a powerhouse. He can shove people, he can prevent getting shoved, he can prevent losing rings. So it's really hard to put either of those two down, and it's impossible to put Blaze and Shadow down because they're just so omniprevalent in every category that you see.
I say, like, it's hard to call out too because, like, I look at Jet and everything too. And I ran them in actual couple speed vehicles, right? And even still, like, they're pretty good stats, even compared to Blaze and Shadow as well. Like, it's weird to say though, but even though Shadow, Blaze, and Jet right there stats differ from just one number, it makes a huge difference in the same, like, vehicle class if they have to be on the racetrack together. And I've been seeing a lot of Jet players. Y'all been actually cooking on the track with extreme gear and speed vehicles compared to the other two.
You see a lot of Shadow Blaze on E-Gear. I think Shadow Blaze really shine the most in power vehicles, ironically. I think they're very good power vehicle users in Sonic Speed. I think at Supersonic Speed, they are easily, like, the two most prevalent characters you see in Time Trial. They're both really solid. Their stats are literally perfectly min-maxed for Time Trial, and that's what makes it really good for them. I think it's still, for me at least, it is coming down to SBO specifically is the worst, but he's still, again, every character in the speed class, very solid. All of them are very solid characters. They're all really good. You see a lot of representation of all of them. It's kind of funny because Metal Sonic is probably the least represented of the characters. He's got one of the best stat lines, arguably, among them all. It just sucks his boost stats the worst.
He's meant to be like a tank somewhat of the speed class. That's the craziest part about this. The hidden tank.
I think the fact that he has so much power is what's going to be the big thing. His speed being 19, his power being 16, it's too good, in my opinion, to rate him any lower than at least, like, middle of the pack. I think it's just hard for me to rate one of these characters as bad, and which is the worst of the best, in a sense, because, like, all these characters are so good.
Is the exact situation as the handling class are too, right? Like, everybody here is so good in their own rights, but someone has to take the L right here. Mind you, I know you want to say SBO, right? Because of the handling and the power stat with the lower speed, which is, all honesty, makes a lot of sense right there. And I have to agree with you on that. Even the Stealth Chaser, his vehicle, it doesn't even focus on speed. Its highest stat is acceleration and handling.
I feel like that. I know we don't bring base vehicles in a lot for anything, or the vehicle stats themselves. But I think in general, if we brought vehicle stats more into this, I think SBO, because he's missing 3 speed, and because he's missing, like, he just misses certain soft caps by just the tiniest of margins. Could be wrong on the soft caps, don't get me wrong. I feel like I could be wrong on these. But I feel like he could be missing out on soft caps for each, like, set of points because of his stat spread being so wonky. Like, the 16 power is what is carrying him from being, like, not, like, a bad character. But he's just, in general, this is not, like, a tier list saying, oh, this character is garbage, never use it. This is mainly a tier list of, on a stat-specific standpoint, what character stat-wise is arguably the worst. And I do think, unfortunately, it has to be SBO, because I don't think having 14 handling is enough to save him from having 17 speed, unfortunately. Because speed does matter in this game, no matter how little it seems like it does. Having a higher speed stat does matter quite a lot, and you see a lot of the time where a lot of these, like, speed characters that are in vehicles that have low speed stats, they just get to carry those vehicles higher and bring them up to a rank or two in terms of power because of it. Like, E-Gear's having some of the lowest speed, but one of the highest boost stats. I don't think him having 8 boosts is going to change that. I think him having 17 speed does make it worse overall if you're running E-Gear. I think same thing with if you're running a handling vehicle. Same thing if you're running a power vehicle. Those have lower speed stats overall.
compared to like speed and acceleration cars. But I think that's what really to me is going to be the hard like definitive answer for SBO being the worst. Is his speed stat is what's ruining it for him.
Yeah, I was gonna bring it up too because with all the stats and everything, especially when you set E-gear up, since the Babylons were all made with E-gear in mind, Jet's stats are what you want for a speed class to have. At least the bare basic, like the bare minimum, like min-max, just to if you get hit, you won't get suffer as much. Like look at his acceleration and power and his handling, right? They're not the best, but it's exactly what you need to balance out the stats for the extreme gear. Any of them, to be exact.
I think it's the same thing with Blaze and Shadow. Like, their stats are perfectly min-max to run E-gear. It's perfectly min-max to run power vehicles. They're able to run speed vehicles, handling vehicles. They can run kind of just anything. It's just the fact that SBO stats are just so weird and so weirdly, like, situated. It's like randomly, like, in a sense, it's like playing D&D and rolling for your stats, and you roll just low numbers. That's what it feels like. He low rolls on all the stats that matter.
It's like you're trying to run a rogue, right? And instead of getting the stats you want, you made your rogue into a barbarian by accident. Like, you have the speed right there, but you can't lose everything else.
It's unfortunately going to be biggest losers SBO because of that.
Unfortunately, the ninja detective has lost the case on this one, and he will not get paid for the races.
Time to handle the definitively best class, arguably in the game, Power Class. Power Class is by far. Let's just do one more check. So we have 6 speed characters, right? We have what, 7 handling characters.
Yep.
We have 8 acceleration characters, and we have 1 boost character, right? And we have about what, 35, 36 characters in total. The Power Class has a super majority of about 13 to 14 characters. They hold a massive majority.
SEGA, I'm not telling you how to like release to your characters, right? I'm sorry for interrupting, right? But like, I think I'll just like try to put all the power characters out for the first half of the year of the game's life, and then you try to balance out everything else later, which is weird call right there.
Oh, absolutely is. And I think it's just absolutely insane that above all the characters that are like built, it's all power. Like, I feel like a lot of these characters could have been put in a different class, but to each their own. You know what I mean? Like, I think the characters we got are awesome.
Yeah.
All right, let's start with the deliberation. So, what makes a power character good? So, in competitive, in time trial, and just in general playing the game, like we said before, power, boost, speed, the 3 most important stats. In the power class, those are the 3 best stats among all these characters.
Yeah.
They all have really solid power. They have really solid speed.
I like to argue with you on that one. Their primary stat is power. Of course, it goes with the name of the class, right? Their secondary stat they focus in is in boost and then speed, which is the weird dump stat they decide to put everything in.
The main gimmick of the power character class is they are supposed to be high reward characters, but they're supposed to be high risk in the sense of their turning capability is very neutered.
And
exactly.
If they get hit,
but
they don't recover
with
as
how the
fast.
game currently is and how power vehicles currently are, this is actually just not true. And especially with the current meta build in the game being Tech Drift level 4, this is not currently true. It is very hard to punish these characters properly, and that's nothing against like the players, nothing against SEGA. It's just how the meta shifted and how the meta has developed. It is nothing against anyone. So because of that, the power class has technically their biggest weakness is not that much of a weakness in the current state of the game.
If anything, they turned the weakness into a liability.
And I think the big thing here is, out of all the power characters, I think the power stat, no matter what, unless you're rocking a power stat under like 18, I would say, like as a baseline power stat, I think if you're under 18, you're in contention for the power stat. But then if you have like some of the lowest speed in the class, you're already in there as well. I think we just got to look at some of these characters real quick. So like Knuckles, Dread, Eggman are the 3 most prevalent power characters that are currently played in all the characters. And if I'm correct, Werehog.
I gotta raise you that right now. So like, from what I've been seeing on these numbers, right, and also from what I've seen online, I've been seeing a lot less Dread players because people are starting to figure out that Knuckles and Dread don't share the same numbers.
The big thing is, Knuckles and Dread, unlike Rusty, let me go back to some of these stats. So, 9 and Tails, right? Same stat line, identical. Handling, Rusty and Amy, identical stat line, literally 1-to-1 ratio. But specifically for Dread versus Knuckles, it is different. Dread has more power, very slightly less boost, and very slightly less acceleration. But he has 2 more power points for that reason. It is one of the most interesting things, but I would actually argue...
Let me just interject on this one quickly. I want my headcanon right now, right? I just want to say someone on Sega really liked Prime, and they just love Dread. That's what I'm going to say on that one.
In a lot of these scenarios, like, specifically, I think Dread is specifically not being played because he has no voice lines, more than anything. I think the same thing goes for Rusty, and I think the same goes for 9.
Oh, of course.
I think Dread, specifically stat-wise, the stat that he's losing out, he's losing 1 boost point, but he's gaining 2 power. I think that doesn't matter that he's losing 1 boost. I think the fact that he's gaining 2 power actually matters more, because that 2 power means you have to have more, because it's, what, 7 power over a character to be able to take rings from them if you bump them, if I'm correct? Because he has 20 power,
it has to be 7
it's
power.
the same thing with Zavok. Because Zavok and him both have 20 power, they can't just get shoved out and lose rings from someone. It's going to take a lot of stats to beat this out. I actually think because of that, they're both fine characters. I think the same thing, like, Eggman, let's talk about Eggman real quick. Why Eggman's so good, since we can, before we get to Knuckle. Eggman, specifically, I know we stated he's one of the best characters in the game. A lot of people might be looking at the stats and be like, Eggman sucks, what are you talking about? So, here's the thing. Eggman is specifically very good because he has the highest speed and the highest boost simultaneously. Because he has 17 power, he's got the same idea as Knuckles in a lot of ways with how his stats are spread, but he has a little more speed. It's funny because that 1 speed and that max boost matters more than losing the power currently because of how stats are spread.
Of course. I think... let me jump in there. I think the one to turn is for people running Knuckles as a meta character, right? Compared to Eggman, is because most people switch their camera angle to dynamic because they want the game to feel faster. If you haven't set the standard, it feels slow. And this is personal for me. I love to play Eggman, especially on Extreme Gear when I have the chance. But compared to Knuckles, the band's too big, he blocks the screen too much, and you can't see hazards in front of you on certain occasions, especially in certain angles.
That's something I've noticed as well, especially in my TT runs. Like, a lot of the time you will, like, as Eggman, because you're such a big body, it's very hard to see things when you're running these races, and it's a big disadvantage. It's part of the reason why characters like on Extreme Gear, like Big, Steve, Alex, Omega, and Eggman are like, they're these very big body characters that take up a lot of space, and it's very hard to fully see what's going on. So it makes it very hard to min-max your angles and your lines without hitting something. But I still think, no matter what, by a stat standpoint,
of course,
the 3 power for Eggman is not going to be enough to ruin him, even though we did talk about why Dread having 2 more power does matter, and I feel like he should be played just as much as Knuckles. I think, inversely, having the high speed and boost stat, it matters more for Eggman, but Knuckles still, like, that one point from Knuckles doesn't matter too much. No matter what, the stats are so close, it's not that big of a difference. It's not going to be the Achilles heel for Eggman. It's the same thing for Knuckles. It's not the Achilles heel for Knuckles to be 1 speed less than Eggman, especially on an E-Gear.
Yeah, especially on E-Gear, but if we're doing, like, straight power with power and you're running the gadget set, I'm not naming any gadget set, you can run it whatever you want. You can run a drift kit, you can run a Ring King setup, you can run an item bounty setup or bag, right? Just to know, any of these characters that get, like, that are, like, running through, you're gonna have enough power to survive any hits. You won't recover as fast, but as soon as you start hitting any boost panel or start chaining drifts, you are going to be the next person in the race to get harassed by anything.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you'll be catching up immediately.
I think that, in general, is the biggest thing to worry about. So, we talked about characters that are mainly played the most. So, now, let's transition this to the worst character. Now, there are, in my opinion, I think there's 3 characters on this list that are very easy to spot that are the worst.
Do you mind if I choose my top 3 and we go from there first? And then you add your 2 extras? My top 3, in my honest view of worst power characters, right? Has to go with Ichiban, unfortunately. Omega, my GOAT. And I gotta say this right here, it has to go straight to Big.
The one character I picked all 3 of those, except I picked one different. I had Big as the 4th contender. I would actually argue Alex is also on that list.
Alex was for me, it's a tie between Alex and Big because their stats are similar enough where I can't argue with it. I prefer Big having I would say actually no, I'll take Big out, put Alex in instead because Big has the better speed stat, but he does make up for it with the handling.
So let's put it this way: why are Ichiban, Alex, and Omega the worst characters? So, although Omega has the highest power, he has by far the lowest speed. And you might be saying, hold up. Storm's in there. What about Storm being worse? Because Storm has low speed. He has a higher boost stat. He actually has the same stat line nearly as Alex. I think Storm is definitely going to be another contender. I completely missed Storm. That's on me. But I think Storm is also another contender to be one of the worst power characters because of his stat line. Because he's super similar to Omega. And same thing with Alex. All three of them are very, very similar. I think Ichiban is the saddest case here because he has... I think this, and it hurts me to say this because I am an Ichiban player. I love Ichiban to death.
You are an Ichiban main. Yeah, I know this.
Genuinely, out of all the other characters, Omega, Storm, and Alex have 11 speed. They are the slowest characters among all the other power characters. They have some of the lowest boost as well, but they have the power to make up for it. And they have some others. They have the power to make up for those stats being lost on speed.
Or they have the acceleration for it to make up for it when they get hit.
Unfortunately, Ichiban has the worst of everything. Unfortunately. Now, Ichiban has 12 speed.
Which is weird to say.
He is tied with Steve and Big for being the second slowest trio of power characters. He has 11 acceleration. But the problem is, a lot of the time you're playing Ichiban will not be with the acceleration in mind because you're going to be playing him in a power vehicle or a different type of vehicle in general. You're not going to play him in a handling car more times than not. You're not going to play him in a speed car a lot of the times. You're going to be playing him in either a power vehicle or an extreme gear. The problem with that is that 11 acceleration doesn't matter, unfortunately. As out of all the other stats, if you're playing him in a power vehicle, it doesn't matter because power itself already innately has a faster gear shift mechanic, so it already got an advantage. On the extreme gear side, extreme gear wants the highest amount of speed and boost you can get to min-max it because that's what you need because it's such a low speed vehicle in general, and because the more boost you have, the better your drifts are in general. Because Ichiban has such a low power or speed stat, he actually makes extreme gear worse as a pick than power vehicle because of it. Unfortunately, because his stats are just so wonky, because the handling doesn't matter. In general, since handling is so low here, him having the highest handling doesn't matter, unfortunately, and him having the highest acceleration doesn't matter. He has the highest acceleration, highest handling. Those don't matter, especially when you really learn how to take your lines with extreme gear and with other vehicles. They are probably the least important, especially with snap drifting. They're not as important as it looks. I think the biggest issue, the fact that he's the lowest boost stat, the lowest speed stat, and the lowest power stat among all the characters, or the second lowest speed stat, but the lowest boost and the lowest power stat among all the characters in the power class, I actually would argue is what makes him so bad. You can't contend with a lot of these other characters. You cannot contend with Knuckles, you cannot contend with Eggman, because your boost and your speed stat are just so much worse, and your power stat is worse than both of those characters in general.
By far, especially in some lobbies I've been seeing now that, we see Werehog and everything so far, but I've been seeing a lot more recently a bunch of vectors popping up in the top rank lobbies. I think people are starting to branch out and realize, okay, we can't run Knuckles, we'll just run a different power character to make up for those stat difference.
The thing is, with Knuckles, is Vector and Zavok have very similar stat lines, and the thing that makes Vector really good is the fact that he has nearly an identical stat line to Knuckles, but better, arguably. His stat line's actually arguably better than Knuckles, but he suffers the same issue as Eggman and Omega, where he's just such a big body to some degree, so it's very hard to fully see everything what you're doing. Knuckles, when he does tricks and stuff and drifts, he actually jumps and pops up for you, so you can see what's in front of you for a second. It can get distracting in some scenarios, but I actually think that's better than having these bigger body characters. So I think Vector being Vector's just, we're off topic, but Vector is just really solid overall. It's very unfortunate to go back, and let's circle back. It's very unfortunate that Ichiban is just in the slump he is. Again, all the power characters, just like all the other characters, every character in this game is solid. They're very solid characters. The hard part is that the main stats that matter are just speed, power, and boost. And the problem is a lot of the time, in the speed stat or in the speed class, you have Espio who just has too much power to min-max, and his base car and other vehicles just don't matter with that much of power stat. Whereas with the power class, you want to have as much boost and power as you can, or boost and speed as you can get. Having such high power, exactly. The fact that you have
make up for the low
so
speed.
Much power doesn't matter because you're already in the class with the highest power. So your substats matter more than the main stat. And unfortunately, inoptimal in a lot of cases, unfortunately,
and it pains me to do this because I love this character.
Wait, hold up. No. Don't put Ichiban there yet.
We'll
We
put
gotta go back
Ichiban
to
up
talk
here
about
'cause
Omega right now.
It pains me to put him there if he is. So, we'll go to Omega. So, what makes Omega bad?
Okay, so as Joker has humbly told earlier, everyone here, that Ichiban's low stats right here because it's focused so much in handling and acceleration, right? Those are two stats that you don't want to focus on in power class. Omega doesn't have that focus, but I feel like since SEGA probably wanted to make these characters lower accurate stats, they dumped everything they had into the power stat and gave him nothing for speed and nothing for boost, and they instead pumped it up into acceleration more for him compared to everybody else around his similar stat line. Because Storm has a better boost. Let's see, Storm and I say ties for stats almost is Omega, Storm, and Alex. But compared to all three of them, Omega has to be the worst one, and it's even for the worst reasons too. Compared to Ichiban, Omega can take a hit, but compared to Ichiban can get away from it. He can walk away scot-free. Omega can't. Stomp for a little bit less, but he can't make up the speed anytime soon. And I realized this early because I didn't live stream this, but I gave myself a personal challenge a couple days ago where I said you know what, I'm gonna try and go for a win with every powered character. Mind you, it was a world match, so things are just more chaotic. I'm trying to get a hit for anything I do under the sun. Mind you, I took a long time to win with some characters, but Ichiban and Omega were definitely the two characters I struggled on the most with, because if I got hit at all, mind you, I was running a ring build where my build is basically my top speed increases with every ring I collect. It's really good. It's good self-sustaining also to make sure you can outrun level 4 users. Omega's low handling compared to Ichiban's, and the speed differential with boost, it is very telltale that he was not built for it. Built for online races as well compared to Ichiban. Especially with their main vehicles, their stats spread is so wildly different. Which I don't want to bring vehicles in this conversation, but between both of these two characters, I could respect Joker's pick for Ichiban being the worst character, but Omega has to at least be tied or at least second place.
Honestly, I can agree to some degree. Genuinely, I think what also makes Omega bad as well, he is just such a cool character. It really is the fact that he's just such a big body. A lot of the time, and we've talked about this already, but a lot of the time, bigger body characters do make it harder to see things, and especially bigger vehicles. It's very hard to see certain things when turning a corner or cutting an inside line. You may not see a certain thing because of how big your character is or how big your vehicle is.
Luckily, SEGA has taken this in mind, and I have footage of this on my own time, right? I'll show you, Joker, right? Each character doesn't change the shape of the vehicle, as you may think.
So every vehicle is static in that sense, model-wise.
Model-wise, they are the same size no matter what. I could run Vector in Metal Sonic's car, for example, right? It would still be the same size. So, the argument of you have a character that's bigger bodied would make the car bigger, it's null and void. They don't change the size of the vehicle, which is one's in itself. It's a blessing in disguise, because dear God, that would have been way worse in this game.
Absolutely.
People would have been riding.
You can't argue, unfortunately, the fact that on Extreme Gear, it's very prevalent how big these characters really are on Extreme Gear, and again, that doesn't mean.
Oh yeah.
The hardest part is finding which characters are the biggest body. It's kind of funny because you have characters like Patrick, Werehog, Knuckles, Dread, who are just so small. You know what I mean? These characters are just so tiny, and they don't obscure a lot of the road. Now, granted, it is a skill diff if you get hit because you can't see because of your character. I'm not gonna pretend like that it isn't, but it does take into effect if you're playing on a more casual level instead of high level world match, high level competitive, things of that nature. It does make a difference even then, because there are times where even some of the better players can be using these bigger body characters and still get hit by a spike ball cutting a corner because their character blocked it for too long.
Yeah, that's it. I understand entirely, especially with some of the vehicles and everything too. If I said earlier, vehicles don't count anything, right? But some of the people say they don't like the HUD being too cluttered because they don't want to see everything, right? A bigger character will cause issues. I had issues at first when I was trying to learn how to play Eggman. I still have issues whenever I play Storm for funsies. Vector and Zavok, I want to say, is the two big body characters that I don't have issues with, which is weird to say. But Omega, my GOAT from beta, and I still play on occasionally right now as a power class, right? He just falls short out of everything you want.
even with falling short on just about everything, I think what even makes it worse is the fact he's a bigger body. Honestly, I think after careful deliberation, I personally think Ichiban is I think Ichiban is in contention for bottom 3 because of his stat line. But in general, because the main build is Extreme Gear, and that's what the main stuff is currently as the meta, Omega, unfortunately, I think would actually have to take the cake as the worst of the power characters. There's got to be a worst of the best, no matter what. No matter how good all these characters are per class, there's got to be a worst character. I think the fact that he has worst acceleration, the power stat doesn't really matter. He's got the lowest boost and the lowest speed. Because on Extreme Gear, the high power is nice, but the Extreme Gear is not built for power in mind. It's meant for boost in mind. So it's meant for having good speed, good boost, and enough handling to take your turns correctly. Power is just not a stat that it cares about as much. And because of that, I think, after my own personal thoughts, even though I think Ichiban is a bottom 3 character, I think Omega, especially with the bigger body and obscurity that he does do to a lot of these items that are on the road, I actually would argue...
especially with narrow tracks.
Especially narrow tracks and narrow roads. I think Omega actually might take the cake, in my opinion, now.
Would it be fair to say we fudged the rules a little bit and just put Ichiban and Omega for worst characters?
I would say no. Even though I would want to put both as the worst, I think to keep things fair, I think it would actually have to be Omega because of the fact he's a big body. Because Ichiban is so small compared to Omega, it makes it super easy to see the track. I think that's what makes it different. I think that's what makes Omega worse. Is not just the stat-wise. I think just the fact that his body is so big and he stands like, because the way he stands, if you see him when he's playing on Extreme Gear, his legs are turned like you're riding a skateboard, but his body, if I remember this correctly, is front and center.
Yes, he basically, in a sense,
he's just like an A pose or something.
Weird way, because since he's a robot, he can because he says he's a robot and everything. He doesn't make the normal like human movements or like for any like bipedal creature. So the fact that he can just like twist his like torso around immediately and do some weird poses also add on to the blindness effect, if possible. I mean, I hate to call it like a blindness right there, right? But yeah, like that's my take on it.
All right, I think after careful deliberation, I think after rethinking it and going back, I would argue I can agree with this argument that Omega is unironically the worst power character. I think if we had to... It sucks, because I love Omega too.
Damn.
Hey guys, it's still a Joker in post here. So, real quick, for anyone that wanted to understand more about why the tier list got cut so short at the very end here, or if anyone that skipped to this part just to see the tier list, I just want to quickly restate and just, in general, state a few things. The tier list is specifically developed because we wanted the character picks to be based on stats alone. This doesn't mean like gadget combos, build combos, things of that nature. We do go over a couple of cases, like with SBO and Omega, we explain more in detail about like how they would function with cars and Extreme Gear, things of that nature, especially with the meta being Extreme Gears currently. So we did go a little in depth on both of those parts and how big of a body Omega is compared to a lot of the other power characters and how he can be a problem on Extreme Gear due to the way he stands. Everything that we chose was specifically through stats alone for the most part. May or may not have had a few different changing opinions because of one thing or another, but for the most part, every single character on this tier list is specifically picked because their stats compared to the other characters of their class are just extremely low, or they're too low to really be comparable to some of the other characters in the class. This does not mean any of these characters are bad by any means. We see a lot of representation at the very start of the video. I showed it off, but every character does get played to a fair degree, and every character is played consistently, so please do not take everything we say as gospel. This is a stats overview of how every character is compared to one another inside of their class. None of these characters are the worst, but from a stat standpoint, by technicality, they are bad for their class, but this does not mean the character should not get picked. I mean, from the characters that are picked here, I will be honest, a lot of these characters are some of the most underrepresented characters from what I've seen and from what Metal has seen, but that doesn't mean they aren't bad by any means. They are really fun. I personally use Omega. I use Creeper personally. I know Metal uses Omega and Rouge. I really enjoy also playing Miku. Miku's one of my main characters with one of my main builds currently. I don't use SBO a lot, but I love SBO as a character. He's one of my favorite characters. So please do not come at our throats because we ended up putting one of your favorite characters on this list.
This is purely a theoretical tier list of what we believe are the worst characters if stats were the only determining factor. Obviously, we used other factors such as vehicles and how Omega stands versus, say, Ichiban, because Ichiban is more narrow than Omega, and Omega stands with his shoulders out. He does a little bit more visual cluttering, is the best way to put it. But, again, all these characters are really fun. I really enjoy all these characters. Same thing goes for Metal. And again, I just want to shout out Metal specifically. Thanks to him, this video is not only a lot better, but without him, I wouldn't have been able to make this tier list video on my own without probably putting characters on here that I wouldn't have really thought more in depth about. So thanks to Metal specifically. And then if you guys disagree with this tier list, please comment down below. I do not mind having some civil conversations about each of these characters because honestly, there is some arguments to be had, especially for the speed tier, because there's 3 main characters in the speed tier that could be worse than SBO. There are 3 characters in the power class that are arguably worse than Omega. And there are 3 characters in the handling class as well you can argue that are actually worse than Rouge, but that is for another video and another time. But again, please comment down below if you think any of these characters do not deserve their position and why.